Sanjeev Bikhchandani, founder InfoEdge India Limited. Sanjay Kirloskar, Convention Chairman and Chairman and Managing Director, Kirloskar Brothers Ltd. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to have you in a special session on life and lessons of a legendary startup founder and investor who also happens to be a good friend and a fellow Stephanian. Welcome, Sanjeev. Truly grateful to you for accepting my request to address AIMA's flagship event, the National Management Convention, and for agreeing to share your journey with our audience today. You've been one of India's most successful digital entrepreneurs across the different eras of internet economy. You founded Naukri.com when the internet startups were better known as dot-com companies. You managed to survive the dot-com bust in the early 2000s and capitalize on the startup boom that followed the proliferation of internet-connected smartphones. An astute businessman, you have not just created new ventures, but have also acquired to build an empire. You now own a clutch of industry-leading online search and advisory services in the areas of jobs, property, marriage, and education. In fact, you're a pioneer in listing startups on stock exchanges. You took InfoEdge public as early as 2006. Now you're grooming other startups for going public, and Zomato has already made a massive splash in the stock markets. You're also a key investor in Policy Bazaar, Shop Kirana, Ustra, Gramophone, Shipsy, Printo, and many other startups. You're also a founder trustee of Ashoka University. The Government of India awarded you the Padma Shri in 2020. Sanjeev, thank you once again for joining us, and a very warm welcome to you.
Rekha, thanks for the invite and the glowing introduction. Much of it exaggerated, I'm sure, but thank you. And Sanjay, thank you for hosting me.
Pleasure. Mr. Kirloskar, always a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for moderating this session. A distinguished leader of a venerable Indian company, you have built a global business that provides critical products for infrastructure, irrigation, oil and gas, and defense sectors. You are the immediate past president of AIMA and the chairman of this National Management Convention. Thank you so much for joining us, and a very warm welcome to you. Ladies and gentlemen, India may have missed the Industrial Revolution, but it is among the leaders of the Internet Revolution. It is no surprise that the world's greatest technology companies are headed by people born and educated in India. Many have returned from the US to build Indian versions of successful digital businesses. However, there are many Indian startup founders who have succeeded by creating businesses that are rooted in the Indian context and culture. They are more readily relatable role models for the young aspiring startup founders in India. In this session, we are celebrating one such pioneer who is also helping many young startup founders succeed. India's startup economy has been transformed by COVID, and what was considered the future has become the present. Businesses of all kinds and sizes have relied on online services to continue operating, and both the direct-to-consumer and B2B startups have taken off. The attitude of and towards the internet startups has changed. The startups are trying to boost their top line and bottom line and not just their user numbers, and the public is looking at not just the convenience they offer, but also the returns they could offer as investment. The digital companies look set to claim preeminence in both the business and stock markets. We have an opportunity of talking with a veteran of the digital economy and find out exactly what is going on in the startup universe and where it is headed. With these words, it is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Kirloskar to conduct the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rekha, for the glowing introduction as well. Sanjeev Bikhchandani, founder InfoEdge India, Ashpati Sigania, President AIMA and Vice Chairman and Managing Director, JK Paper Limited, Rekha Sethi, Director General, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Bikhchandani, many thanks for doing this session and agreeing to share your secrets of founding and mentoring blockbuster startups. You have built an online classifieds empire, which includes leading search and advisory services such as Naukri.com, 99acres.com, Jeevansathi.com, and Shiksha.com. But lately, you have gained wider frame for mentoring other startups and preparing them for IPOs. The Zomato IPO has already been a hit, And now Policy Bazaar seems to be ready to make a splash in the stock market. You seem to have a pipeline of unicorns, and all of us are watching your every move in the startup market. We would love to know how you have learned to spot winners and what other startup founders and investors could learn from you. You grew up in Delhi, where the government used to be the most obvious employer, but you looked for a destiny in business. After your BA from the prestigious St. Stephen's College, you did your MBA from the equally prestigious IIM Ahmedabad and joined HMM, which is now known as GlaxoSmithKline and Consumer Healthcare. Working for an MNC was considered a privilege in those days, but you checked your job in less than 2 years to found InfoEdge. You were very much a part of the zeitgeist of the liberalization wave of the 1990s, when new opportunities opened up for young entrepreneurs as the economy expanded and globalized. However, it took many years for you to make it in business. Before Naukri.com became your calling card, you spent many years trying to build businesses in research, consulting, training, etc. The arrival of the internet was the best news for aspiring entrepreneurs of our generation. I think we are about the same age. And it simply took away the barriers to setting up a business and the need for expensive real estate. But I guess it was anything but easy. And it took you many years of slogging in anonymity before Naukri.com became a hit. A quarter century after you untied yourself from the safety of a job and plunged into business without a parachute, you have a digital conglomerate worth more than $9 billion with more than 4,500 employees. Your company and the companies you invest in touch lives of hundreds of millions of people every day. Not bad for a company started in the servants' quarter with a paid-up capital of rupees 2,000. You have received accolades from all kinds of organizations, including those in media, consulting, and higher education. You've also been given the Padma Shri by the government in the year 2020. The latest chapter in your story is of particular interest to a lot of people. Suddenly, your public identity has shifted from being the founder of Naukri.com to the super investor of Zomato. Analysts are forecasting fantastic numbers for the Zomato stock, and they expect similar spectacular debut for another unicorn in your portfolio. According to media reports, you have been investing aggressively in 2021 in both early stage startups and the nearly IPO ready ones. The swathe of your investment includes startups in supply chain, shipping and logistics, fintech, travel, niche e-commerce, hyperlocal grocery, elementary school education, intercity transportation, and even drone solutions. For many, you are the new prophet of startup investing. So in this session, we would like to talk about the state of the startup economy and where it is headed. So let us begin this conversation now. So the first question for you, unless you want to make an opening statement.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, is when and how did you catch the business bug in times when most of the young kids dreamt of becoming IAS officers or getting MNC jobs?
Yeah, so look, my father was a doctor in the government. My mother's a homemaker. We didn't have any business in the greater family, anybody in business. So we were a family of doctors, engineers, and government employees. If I look at my uncles and everybody, related to my parents, and so there wasn't business in the family. But there are parents, there are children who will do what their parents do, and there are children who simply won't. I was the youngest in the family, and my elder brother became he's a professor at UCLA, and PhD from Stanford in economics. My sister joined the government. So I was a bit of a rebel. Being the youngest, I had to be different. And so there are children who will do what their parents do, and there are children who simply won't. I was in the second category. And so by a process of elimination, I said, I will not be a doctor. And second was I did not join the government. And then by a process of elimination, I guess, by the time I was finishing school, I had said at some point in time, I will start a company of my own. In those days, the word entrepreneur was not known or fashionable. So I didn't say I'll be an entrepreneur. I'll say I'll start a business. What business, when business, how business, there was no capital. All that was, a problem we figured out later. It was a fuzzy goal. And, that goal stayed with me since I was very young, maybe 12 or 13 years old. It kept coming back as a dream and aspiration. And eventually, after working for 5 years, and after college and IIM, I worked for 3 years between college and IIM, and then 2 years after IIM, I quit my job and I became an entrepreneur. And there was no big idea. There was no big vision. It was just, I don't want that life. Let me drift and explore. And for 7 years, we drifted and did a whole bunch of small things, teaching, training, report writing, databases, whatever came my way to survive. And then after 7 years, we launched Naukri as the 21st small idea. We just took jobs from newspapers and magazines around the country and put them on the net. And we called it Naukri. And, traffic began to come. At that time, when we launched, there were only 14,000 internet accounts in the country, but it looked like a large number to me, large enough to sort of eke out a living. I didn't want to sort of either found or build or run a large business. I just wanted, to create, be independent, be in charge of my own time, life priorities, and make enough money to have a decent, comfortable life. Right? But the internet happened, it grew. And we got funded competition. Therefore, we were forced to raise venture capital. We had said no to venture capital twice or thrice when they approached us, saying, I don't want to complicate my life. I'm very happy running a small company on one floor of my father's house. We had moved out of a 7-quarter, moved out to a full floor by then. And, I was actually quite happy running a small company. But then once you raise venture capital, then you become responsible, accountable. You've got to, give monthly MISs. You can't go to office up one floor in shorts and t-shirt anymore. You got to get a team. You got to move out of your house, and you got to move to a proper office, which we did in Noida. So all those things began to happen to us. But once we were in the game, we said, okay, if we are in the game, we should play it well, and which is what we tried to do. And thus far, it seems to have worked all right.
What you said reminds me so much of my great-grandfather who founded the business. He was also the youngest in the family. He didn't want to do what his parents wanted him to do. In those, and I'm talking about the 1880s, the eldest brother was a doctor, the second one was a teacher, and he wanted to be an artist. So I can understand the fears that your parents would have had when you decided to do something completely different. So let me go to the next question, which is, how did your family then deal with the many failed attempts to build a successful business?
Well, actually, in the early days, success for us had a very different meaning. When I was the first 7, 8, 10 years, if you survived, you were successful, right? And in order to survive, I had a very simple principle: be ultra frugal, keep your costs low, so that no matter how low the revenue is, you still got your nose above the water. Mm-hmm. And it was that frugality, that frugal discipline of the next 10 years, before we raised venture capital, that is still with us. We are still a relatively frugal and commercially prudent company. In today's day and age, in the .com era, in the tech era, in the crazy investing era, and the crazy valuations era, it is, I do still believe that it is good to be commercially prudent. And that's what we are like to do ourselves, and that's what we like to encourage our investing companies to do. Right? I think so. Therefore, I was never a failure. I wasn't a success. Yeah. A wide success for the first 10 years, but never a failure because we survived. Yeah. Right. And in the first 10 years, I think for roughly 6 years off and on, I could not take a salary home. But, I was living in my parents' home, so there was no rent to be paid. I was, the kitchen was running. Whenever I could contribute, I would contribute. When I, couldn't, I didn't. So I think entrepreneurs need very supportive families in India, especially if they are first generation and they don't have a lot of capital. Right? Because India, even though we are seeing a lot of venture capital nowadays, is fundamentally a capital scarce country. Yeah. And therefore, when you're starting out, you usually will be short of capital. Now, if you're fortunate, you will get some external funding, but many people don't. And, if you look at the number of startups being funded and you compare it to the number of people trying to start out in business, it's just a tiny fraction. It's just that they make the headlines, right? And therefore, if your capital is scarce, how do you survive? I think that is the key question. You need supportive families in India. And our families are our safety net.
Yeah. So how, Naukri.com was obviously your first one, if I'm not wrong. And what did you learn from it?
So I think if I look back on the businesses that have worked very well for us, right? So, and even before Naukri, I think for 7 years, I was doing a whole bunch of other things. I think if you solve an unsolved problem, right, for the customer or for your prospective customer, the customer will buy, you don't have to sell, right? I think that's one key learning. So don't be a me too. Don't do an idea just because it worked in the US. Your idea must come from observing the customer, talking to the customer. Perhaps you've been a customer yourself, right? Who's had a pain point. So if you start with a pain point, so what, I say is that successful companies are built on deep customer insights, right? And insights can be simple, yet most people do not get it. So I'll give you one example. When I was working in my last job in HMM, I was in the marketing team. I was working on the brand Horlicks, right? And there were 7, 8 of us in that open hall. We would sit, all junior marketing executives, all from good business schools, IIMs, FMS, Bajaj, right? And I used to observe that when the office copy of Business India would come in and go from desk to desk, everybody would read it from the back because there were 35 to 40 pages of appointment ads at the back, right? And very often people wouldn't even see the articles, they just see the ads and pass it on. And then they would start discussing about this job, that company, what do you think? So there were people who were happy in their jobs, they would not apply. And there weren't that many options in 8990 pre-liberalization in Delhi. So if you wanted Delhi, you wanted FMCG, you wanted marketing, not sales, which means head office Delhi, you wanted MNC, there were just 2 companies, Nestle and HMM. And it looked like they would not hire from each other because there was no cross movement. Right? So you were in the best job you could be, right? And yet people would get animated about jobs. And that's when I figured that jobs are a high interest category of information. 7 years later, or 6 years later, when I saw the internet for the first time, I said, why not get newspapers and magazines from around the country and just dump the printed appointment ads in your own words, in your own data structure onto the net and see what happens. It was a small experiment, but I was confident because I had that insight. I was confident that we have no money, we were broke, right? But without advertising, traffic will come. Because jobs are a high interest category of information, I had that insight, right? Likewise, Zomato, right? When I met Deepinder Goyal for the first time in 2007, right? The site was getting traffic, it was not doing much revenue. I used it, I liked it. Hitesh Oberoi, CEO now, business partner, he used it. We both liked it. And we, began to sort of, I reached out to Deepinder. It was a cold email I sent him. And I met him. I said, Deepinder, ye idea kahan se aaya? Where did you get this idea from? Because you're getting traffic. Now, the reason why I liked this site was it was the only site that had all the menu cards. No other site had the menu cards of the restaurants. So, I'm a foodie, my son's a foodie. We would sit and plot and plan on Friday or Saturday morning, think where are we going for lunch this weekend or dinner? And we would look at the menu cards. And I found it very useful. So I said, the idea kahan se aaya? And he told me a very interesting story. He said, I was working in Bain Consulting or IIT, Delhi. And there were maybe 50 or 60 of us working in that office in Gurgaon. And mostly young, mostly male, mostly single. Many living away from home, which means no mummy to pack lunch for you. Working hours were long, consulting. So you invariably ended up having 2 meals in office. Office had a cafeteria that would not serve food, but you could bring your own food and have it there. And to make life easy for the employees, the admin staff had collated the delivery menu cards of all the restaurants that would deliver there, maybe 60, 70 of them, and kept them in a file folder in the cafeteria to refer to. And Deepinder said, at 1 o'clock every day you go down, then you have to wait 20 minutes in line to access the file. And then you have 2 minutes to decide. Then you phone up the restaurant and then, the guy delivers 45 minutes, then you get lunch. It's a huge pain. So I came in one Saturday and I scanned that entire file folder of menu cards. And I put it on my personal page in the office intranet. Right? So if you want to have lunch at 1, you access my page at 12 o'clock, you order by 12:15, lunch is there by 1, it's much better. He says, within 3 days, the IT infra guy came to me and said, man, what have you done? 95 or 98% of internal traffic is going to your page. What's happening? He said, that's when the penny dropped. And I realized that, look, menu card aggregation has value. Just as I had discovered that job aggregation has value a decade or so ago. Right? And with his boss's permission, he went on weekends and just began to gather menu cards and restaurant information of all restaurants in Delhi NCR. When he had 800 of them, he launched the site. And it immediately began to get traffic. He had hit a pain point. And he was getting traffic without advertising because people found value. Yeah. And the idea of what will create value was actually very simple. It didn't cost money. The idea of what will create value in my case was actually very simple. It didn't cost money. Just 29 newspapers once a week on the day of the appointment ads, you have to get into the office. Right? Yeah. It was just that insight that did it. So, one of the key questions we ask when we look at a startup is it getting what we call natural traction? Mm-hmm. Is the traffic coming on its own? Is it being downloaded? Are people using it? If they are without advertising and marketing and the traffic is growing, it means that they've hit a hot button. They've identified something that people want. The second question we ask is, where do you get the idea from? Right? And I love what Deepinder told me. Right? And the third question we often ask is, right now you're bootstrapping because we usually are the first check-in. So you're probably not taking a salary, a very low salary. After we invest, what kind of salary do you think is fair for you to take? Yeah. So we're not interested in a specific answer. We are interested in how he approaches that question. And what does he feel is fair and justified? And that tells us a lot about the priorities, his or her priorities. And that tells us how frugal the entrepreneur will be. And that tells us, how much he or she is willing to sacrifice in order to make, some people value their equity, their own holding. Say, I will dilute less, or I'll take less salary. I don't want to consume money in my salary. Some people say, hey, you know what? I've given up 3 years of salary. I'm an MBA from so place. This is my market salary. I have to recover my market plus my last 3 years of, that's the wrong answer for us. So you have a cost plus entrepreneur. I need this one to survive. I'll take a little bit more than that. And you have a entitlement mindset entrepreneur. And, it's, we will obviously prefer to back the former rather than the latter.
Okay. Going back to the late 90s, how did you survive the dot-com bust?
I think the fact that we had been bootstrapping for 10 years before raising venture capital had built in us a frugal mindset which said, kharche kam karo. So when the money came in April 2000, first of all, we got lucky. I think good, successful entrepreneurs also have to get lucky. We got the money 2 weeks before the meltdown. Now, having always been short of cash for 10 years, right? We really valued money. And ये पैसा आया है, इसको बैंक में रखो, हमने बोला. The meltdown हुआ, when the meltdown happened, typically when meltdowns happen, the believers in the earlier story, right? They are in denial. It's a temporary correction. 6 months it'll be okay. ठीक हो जाएगा. It'll come back. Now, we were paranoid because we had been through 10 years of no cash. Right. And we said, boss, maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. But let's understand it. We got a valuation we didn't deserve. We got money we didn't deserve. Okay, because it was a bubble. Whether or not a bubble has burst, we should keep the money in fixed deposits in the bank. Right. Even if we delay our investment by 6 months, it doesn't matter. As it turned out, it was a meltdown. So first thing about surviving the meltdown was we got lucky. We did not have time to spend the money foolishly. If we raised the money 1 year earlier, we would have spent it foolishly. Right? So we got lucky with timing. Second is we were naturally frugal and paranoid because we had come through 10 years of no cash. Right? Yeah. Third, we understood we'll never get this money again. So whatever you have to do in this money. So keep it in fixed deposit in the bank and then start spending prudently. So we did not spend a lot on advertising, which is the easiest thing to do, cut a check to the ad agency. We did not take an expensive office. We moved out of my father's house, but we took up a 10 rupee a square foot office in the back lanes of Noida in between rubber and chemical factories with open drains and sewers. We did the interior as well because we wanted that once people come in, they should feel they're working for a very, very good company. But we said fixed monthly outgo hum kam karenge. Capex kar lenge, but fixed monthly outgo kam karenge. So we spent 25% or maybe 20% of our money raised on the interiors of that office, right? Which is a big thing. But we said we're a people's company and therefore people must be happy. Getting here may be hard and the surroundings may not be great, but once you're inside, you're okay. So we spent that money, but we did not have a large monthly outgo. We did not, and I think that paid off because we spent money. And the third is we stumbled upon what we call our repeatable, profitable unit pretty quickly. You see, other .coms in that era, many of them had built high cost structures in the anticipation that second round hoga, third round hoga of fundraise. You don't need to make a profit immediately because, the market doesn't value profits, right? And we were 10 years of frugality, 10 years of bootstrapping. He said, yeah, this is it. You got to survive with this money. So cut your coat according to your cloth. And this is the only cloth you have, right? And we stumbled upon what we kept racking our brains. How do we make money? How do we make money? Because we've moved into a new office, we've done the interiors, we've hired some people. So overheads have gone up. We're losing money. When a monthly salary bill was 4 times the revenue around that time, because we had hired people. You add rent, you add electricity, you add a whole bunch of things. You're at 5 or 6 times your. We had only so much money left in the bank, right? And there was no hope of getting extra. But what happened was that we had stumbled upon what I call today our repeatable, profitable unit, which basically, Hitesh joined the company a little before we raised venture capital, and he looked after sales and marketing. And we were selling a direct mail before that. And he said, listen, let's do an experiment. Let's hire 4 salespeople and send them out in the market and see what happens. Now, he'd come from Hindustan Lever, right? Old economy. Okay, I said, yeah, sure. Hire 4 sales. He went and hired 4 salespeople, and they went out and sold our services to HR managers. And we discovered within 3 months that their average salesperson was generating revenue of 50,000 rupees a month, headed north. Right? Every month is going up. And the average salesperson total cost, which is, salary, commission, conveyance, mobile phone bill, depreciation on computer, hot desking. So, divided that, depreciation on desk, office rent, was 22,000 rupees. In other words, the average salesperson was generating a surplus of 28,000 rupees on his own cost, headed north. This is headed north. And the beauty about our business is that the only variable cost that we had was sales commission. It doesn't cost you more money to put an extra job on Naukri. So we say, hey, this is pretty cool. Let's just keep adding salespeople till the last salesperson is not breaking even. And we did that for 2 years. Just kept on repeating it. And at the end of 2 years, we had 240 salespeople across 11 offices around the country. And we had broken even at 35 times the revenue prior to raising venture capital. So I think A, we were frugal, B, we were lucky, C, we hit a repeatable profit unit. D, when you don't have a choice what survival ka sawal hai, so, you will find a way.
I remember quite a few very funny ads from that time, right? And so I'd like to ask you, at that time, I'm sure there was competition from Monster.com. How did you, was it frugality plus were there so many other ideas that made you survive the onslaught of Monster.com?
Well, so I think fundamentally there was self-belief.
Mm-hmm.
That listen, just because they have more money than us doesn't mean they're smarter than us. Just because they're from America doesn't mean they're better than us, right? So there's fundamentally a self-belief. There was a burning ambition and desire to build a world-class, world-scale company out of India. We wanted to do that. Ultimately, see, you work to a point for some profit, some money, right? But beyond that, you work for building an institution, you work for a legacy, you work for, the sort of the glory you get from building an institution, or the feeling you get when you build an institution is much, much more than any money you make, right? And that's what is driving us. That हमें ये करना है, हमें ये long run के लिए करना है. You see, great companies are the outcome. They last more than 100 years, right? The longest lasting company was the East India Company, 250 years, but of course that is aided by government monopoly, right? But even so, 100 years, 150 years, great companies. And they continue to refresh themselves, innovate, stay relevant, adapt, right, and grow. So great companies are the outcome of a lifetime's effort of some people, right? If you look at Microsoft, it took Bill Gates and his original and subsequent senior colleagues a lifetime. You look at Google, they've been at it since 98, they're still there. You look at Facebook, at it since 2005, still there. You look at General Motors, it became great largely because of the leadership and the team that Alfred P. Sloan put together, and took 30, 40 years. So if you want to build a great institution, you got to commit a lifetime. And I think we realized that fairly early. कि कुछ अगर बढ़िया चीज करनी है तो 20, 30, 40 साल लगेंगे.
Okay. I'm sure a lot of people would now like to know why you turned from investing in high potential startups instead of competing with it.
So, see, 2006 we went public. Right? I was 43. Now, in order to go public, we had to work really hard for about a year and a half to get the company IPO ready. During that time, I had to basically not do a complete CEO's job. I had to focus on the IPO. Right? Which meant that I handed over a lot of my stuff on a day-to-day basis to Hitesh, who was CEO. When we went public, it was obvious to many people, including Hitesh, me, everybody, that listen, even if I step aside as CEO, right, Hitesh can run the company. So one is I can hang on to the CEO's position and we continue as is, which is an option. And the other is, listen, I mean, if somebody else can do it, why should I do it? And it might be better for the company. Maybe Hitesh is younger, 10 years younger. He'll come with fresh ideas. This is an evolving industry, internet industry. It's a new age industry. Maybe I'm a dinosaur, right? And so board, Hitesh, me, we sort of kept discussing, and we decided in 2010 that I would step away as CEO. And prior to that, we had raised a bunch of money. It was slushing around in the bank. The company was profitable. We didn't need the money. One of the things we'd said in the IPO use of proceeds in the RHP was acquisitions. But when we went out to actually acquire, we found that A, nothing's available that's worthwhile, and B, whatever is there is too expensive, right? And we said we can't spend this kind of money to buy that kind of asset or that kind of company. And so we said, okay, what do we do now? So we said inorganic growth has got many facets. One is acquisition, other is investments.
Yeah.
And so why not invest in the promising startups coming up? So what we began to put a toe in the water, small investments here, there. It was a cottage sector kind of activity. And increasingly, Hitesh was handling more and more of the company. So around 2007, we began to invest and I was in charge of it. So it started with a cottage sector activity. And then gradually it assumed a life of its own because, we rode the wave that came. We didn't anticipate it. But it happened and we were in the right place at the right time, doing the right things, right? So Zomato, so Policy Bazaar, we invested 20 crores in 2008 for 49% of the company. It was a PowerPoint presentation then. It was pre-revenue, pre-company. Zomato, we put in 4.5 crores to 33% of the company. And both these worked out well. There were a number of others that did not work out well.
Yeah.
Okay, but we were learning. But the fact that we did two and they worked out as well as they have is, I think, it's a testimony to the management teams and the founders there. So people give me credit. In your introduction of me, you gave me credit. Rekha gave me credit. But the truth is, the credit belongs to people who did it. The people who did it are the founders and the management teams of Zomato and Policybazaar. People give me credit for InfoEdge. So many other people other than me have done so much more for InfoEdge than I have. But yeah, I get called to talks, and therefore I get the credit. But actually, the credit belongs to so many other people, more than me.
Yeah, finally, all part of a team. Now, let me choose a few questions from the chat and club them. I'm sorry, I won't be able to take the names of individual people. The first question is, now that Zomato has opened the floodgates for startup IPOs, which other startups may be ready for IPOs this year, or is it?
Well, I think that list is known. I mean, Cartrade has gone public already. I think there are a few which will look at doing either a SPAC or list overseas because they're domiciled overseas.
Mm-hmm.
But there are many, many, many who will choose to list in India. And Policybazaar has filed with DRHP. I think Paytm has filed. I think MobiKwik has filed. There are several who filed, right? And they're working towards an IPO. SEBI's, I guess, will have to give them the final approval and the green signal, and then they will go public if all goes well. Of course, the market has to stay intact. That's a precondition. But right now, it's looking like the market isn't going to stop anytime soon, right? So there will be enough startups going public. And I think many of them will have very successful IPOs. And so you will see a coming of age of the startup ecosystem. I won't say internet startup ecosystem, I'll say startup ecosystem, because there'll be a number of startups who are not necessarily internet companies. I mean, Renew Power has gone public with a SPAC on NYSE. Yeah. So I think you want to see a lot of capital coming into these companies through the IPO route, and therefore coming into India, and that's a good thing.
Okay. In which sectors would one be likely to encounter more unicorns in the coming months?
So look, we don't do it top down, right? We actually go in early stage, right? And we do it bottom up. So we don't say, hey, we've got 4 classified sites, we are missing an auto site, let's do an auto site. Because if we were to do that, right, 2 things. One is you'll either get into a market leader at a very expensive valuation, or you will get into number 4 or 5 site at a cheap valuation, but nothing will come of that because it won't succeed. And you will miss out some very good ideas. If we had done a top-down approach, saying which sectors first, and then drill down on that, we would never have done Zomato or Policybazaar, because we would never have dreamt that let's do a restaurant listing site. We would never have dreamt let's do a insurance comparison site. It would have been out of our search, right? We do it bottom up. We meet 1,000 startups, see what's bubbling up from underneath, and say which founder looks good, what idea looks interesting, is it getting traction, is there something happening here, is there a larger trend here, and then we invest. We often fail, we sometimes succeed. So long as the ones we succeed in, more than make up for the ones we fail in, we're doing all right. We're on the plus side of the equation, right? And that's how we do it. So look, but having said that, look, there are going to be unicorns all over the place. There are going to be business models that you have not heard of or could not have imagined on your own. There'll be startups in fintech that are unicorns. There will be startups in edtech that will be unicorns. There will be all marketplaces. There will be all kinds of unicorns, right? And the issue is not unicorns. I think unicorn is a used and abused term. See, the truth is that Fed has put in $4 trillion into the of liquidity over the last 12, 15 months, 18 months. Now, this is causing asset price inflation in many places around the world, whether it's unlisted companies or even stock markets. We've seen the stock market run up. Now, a company may not have changed its fundamentals very much over the last 18 months because it's been COVID, because it's been locked down. In fact, its profits may even be lower. Yet its valuation may be 2x, 3x of what it was. It's a lot of it is liquidity driven. So let's not mistake the increase in the number of unicorns as success on fundamentals. Because if the liquidity dries up, right, the startups have to ask themselves that if I don't get my next round, what will I do? And if you're building a business model that is robust enough to survive a liquidity withdrawal, then you're onto a good thing, even though your valuation may correct temporarily. Because your underlying growth will sooner or later, give you that valuation back. So I would still say focus on business fundamentals, customer satisfaction, value proposition, innovation, sales, revenue, cost, and therefore consequent profits.
So there's another question. How has the big bang of Zomato expanded the universe of your startup investments?
Look, an IPO, as far as Zomato management team is concerned, is just another day. It is a culmination of a long process. But for them, life carries on. They were back at work within 3 days. It was, I think, a Friday that listing happened, and Monday they were back at work. And in fact, they even had an offsite that weekend, saying, okay, now we've gone public, now what do we do? And the conclusion was, we continue to do what we've always done, right? Likewise for us, this has simply proved what we have known for a long time, that there is value in startups. There's value to be created, had, made in startups. We've always known it. Just identify the right ones, get in and be patient and be supportive, right? So it has not changed anything fundamentally. It has perhaps given us more confidence that this kind of fulfills what we had said, and therefore keep on doing more of it, right? But our principles of investing haven't changed. Our investing thesis hasn't changed. Our strategy has not changed. Get in early, perhaps first institutional check, stay for a long time, identify the good ones. I mean, see, I'll tell you one secret, Sanjay. Investors may believe that, they are geniuses. We're not. We're not. We have one skill. Can we spot the good ones? Right? Now, the secret of successful early stage investing is to invest behind teams and companies and founders who are going to succeed anyway, with you or without you. Deepinder Goyal and company would have succeeded anyway. Yashi Daya and company would have succeeded anyway. Now, it's not our genius that made them succeed. It's their genius. हमारा ये था कि we came in early, we spotted them, we said, यार boss हमसे पैसे ले लो. And they said, okay. They needed the money. We needed investment. It was a happy sort of handshake. Right? And after that, we were supportive and persistent. So we've been in policy about 13 years, still staying. We've been in Zomato 11 years, still staying. So, you got to play for the long game.
Yeah.
To spot the right ones early, play for the long game.
Okay.
And Baki, if you spot the right one, it's their genius, not yours.
Yeah. I guess if you're not worried about who gets the credit, there's no limit to what you can achieve, right? So last two questions before Rekha comes in. I'll ask both of them one after the other. After a quarter century in online business, what have been your most important learnings about entrepreneurship and leadership? That's number one. And number two, what can young startup founders learn from you? And which 2 or 3 mistakes would you advise them to avoid?
So the first question, I'd say, I think one big learning for me in hindsight is to be a great entrepreneur and not merely a good one, right? To be a good entrepreneur, you have to identify opportunities. To be a great entrepreneur, which means building a great big company over an extended period of time, withstand the test of time. You've not just got to spot opportunity. You've got to understand and manage risk. That's really important. Because until you face a downturn, you don't fully comprehend the risks you took in the boom. Because risks you took in the boom may have led you to certain cost structures, decisions, commitments, which are very difficult to service in a downturn. And therefore, understanding and managing risk and not just opportunity is really important. The second great learning is that, look, it's about people, it's about execution, build great teams, share the wealth, share the credit. That's really important. This is no longer, there are very few companies who can make it with the founders and the promoters owning 90%, 95%. Be prepared to, give big chunks of the company away to people who help you make it happen. That's important. There are knowledge industries. You will be secure in your knowledge, capability, domain expertise, and not by your ownership necessarily. Okay. Sorry, what is the second question?
What can startups learn from you, and which?
So look, one thing I tell, apart from the fact that focus on customer insight, the other thing I tell people is that the customer's money is better than the investor's money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Reason being that if you're getting the customer's money and you're getting money from the same customer repeatedly at a price that's higher than your cost, then chances are you have a viable business, so long as you can get enough customers to pay you on those terms, which means you're making your unit economics are right, the customer's buying repeatedly, which means you have something the customer wants. You have a viable company, right? And if you are getting the customer's money on these terms, the investor's money will almost certainly follow. Because investors love to invest behind businesses that are getting the customer's money, right? On the other hand, if you get the investor's money first, right, there is no guarantee the customer's money will follow. The customer is unforgiving. The customer is not your uncle or your aunt or your cousin who will give you money, without seriously examining what you're selling, right? And getting the investor's money is often about impressing two MBAs in their mid-20s across the table with a PowerPoint. But getting the customer's money is a lot harder. You're subject to a lot more scrutiny, right? So therefore, focus on the customer's money rather than the investor's money.
Okay.
But very often we fail to see that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sanjay.
Sanjeev, for agreeing to be on this program for AIMA, and wish you and all your startups a great success going forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you.